Coogs House. The Houston Cougars are officially in the Big 12, ready to play football games this fall, and they're going to be relying on leadership from a place that's used to not getting the credit. Let's jump on in.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, going to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater who can't step by, please be sure to subscribe down below. That way we get the latest on the Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Welcome back to the YouTube channel, and it is good to see you again. Remember, we're doing some sort of a giveaway every 250 subscribers. We are over 1,300 now, approaching that 1,500 mark rapidly. So make sure you subscribe down below and then comment and like the video to let us know that you are entered in the contest. Now, if you have thoughts about the Big 12, thoughts about college football, obviously throw some of those in the chat below. If you have thoughts about college basketball, even, we're getting ready for that too, throw that in the chat below. If after watching today's video you have no idea what to say in the comments, but you want to be entered in the contest anyway, tell us if a corn dog is just a deep fried meat Twinkie. All right, so today's episode, we're going to look at the offensive line group as a whole after getting to talk to them and Dana Holgorsen some at Big 12 Media Days last week. Really intriguing answers as far as leadership go. Really excited to talk about this stuff today because I think it's a group that gets kind of looked down upon because it's easy to talk about only the things that don't go right as opposed to the things that do go right for an offensive lineman. That's kind of just the life of a lineman. I'm talking too much. Let's hear from Patrick Paul, Jack Freeman, and Dana Holgorsen quickly. When people think Houston thinks sexy skill positions and receivers, we sent two offensive linemen here today. What does that say about the offense, the program, et cetera, y'all?
I would say that it says, basically that the leaders this year of the team are going to be mostly in the trenches. So because we have three guys from the O-line, D-line from here. So I'd say basically just showing that the veterans on the group are in the O-line and the D-line.
Yeah, just like you said, we got two guys here that should kind of tell you about, our group as an individual whole, So, we got me, Pat, Tank, Ruben, Tyler, Hayden, Max, new transfers. We got a lot of older guys that have played a lot of snaps, so we got a lot of experience, and we're really excited for this year because we got Coach Nagabi now, a lot of positive vibes. The energy is amazing. He's always trying to encourage us. Never discouragement. So that's the biggest thing. But when it comes to leadership, me and Pat, we definitely worked really hard to be where we're at. So we definitely really worked really hard to be where we're at. So this is my 6th year. So this is it's really surreal for me just being here and being able to represent our team. I'm assuming the same as Pat.
Yeah, Pat and Jack are staples with our offense. They've started for 4 years. They've been here going on 5 years now. Those guys deserve to be here. They've played a lot of ball. The rest of our team are old and new or young and new. So I feel good about a lot of the young kids that we have coming into the program and some of the transfers that we've got that have veteran experience. There ain't two people on offense more deserving to be here than Jack and Pat. So those guys are loyal. Those guys have been through some things and excited about their last year at the University of Houston.
All right, so as I mentioned beforehand, those are all taken from Big 12 Media Days. I put all the clips from all of the things from Big 12 Media Days on the YouTube channel. That link is in the description afterwards. So if you, after listening to this episode, want to go back and listen to every answer and every question that they had to say, go back and check that out as well. Again, that's posted to the YouTube page. You can see again, it was Patrick Paul, it was Hassan Hippolyte, it was Nelson Caesar, it was Jack Freeman, and it was Coach Dana Holgorsen. But I hope in those quotes you understood a little bit what they're talking about. Each asked some version of the exact same question about how, we don't think of Houston as an offensive lineman's place to be, or as a team led by offensive linemen. It's typically a receivers or quarterback kind of situation. I guess they had it all over there for a minute, right? So it's a defensive lineman. Offensive line is never typically what you think of for Houston leadership. And they sent 2 offensive linemen to Big 12 Media Days. And I think that is a big, big indicator of the leadership on this team. Remember, Pat and Jack and Holgorsen were all quick to point out, like, look, they've been there a long, long time. This is Jack Freeman's 6th year on campus, and after a turbulent road himself, after starting some games as a sophomore, not getting to play a whole lot as a junior, and back and forth, right? He can speak to a lot of different angles and lead this team in a lot of different ways. He can talk to the young guys about making an impact right away. He can talk to the guys on the bench, but being a bench guy right away and playing a role in practice and kind of always being ready to have your number called and those kinds of things. He can see the light at the end of the tunnel for a guy that maybe wants more reps. He can be a good leader in all of those ways. Patrick Paul can be a good leader for all. I mean, he is, by all accounts, apparently going to be a fairly high draft pick this spring if things go right for him this fall. And so he can talk to guys at that kind of talent level, right? About like, listen, you have to always be ready, always be working. You never know who's watching, working through every rep, grinding through every rep, knowing what the kind of thing, how it looks to be a future pro playing at Houston. Patrick Paul can talk through that to anybody on the roster as well. I think the most telling thing of the 3, though, was obviously Coach Dana Holgorsen, because he, along with the rest of the staff, could have picked any of the captains, any of the team captain types to come and be representative of the program. And he chose Patrick and Jack because of their time spent on campus, their time spent in the program. He mentioned, they got a lot of new guys throughout the entire interview, the entire questions, set of questions at Media Day. A lot of new guys on this roster. And Jack and Patrick have been here since the start. Jack has been here since before Holgorsen was, right? And so this idea that, like, if we're going to be putting our best foot forward and representing our leadership at the Big 12 level, it's going to be these guys. It's going to be Patrick Paul. It's going to be Jack Freeman. And frankly, they were up guys too. Like, it's going to be Ruben Unije. It's going to be Tank Jenkins. It's going to be these guys that you don't hear the names of a lot because they're not the ones scoring touchdowns and making tackles. And so they might not get the statistics you typically think about in a box score or whatever. But that doesn't mean they're not having a leadership impact or an on-the-field impact in the way these things go. Obviously, the offensive line group is the one that has the steepest hill to climb heading into the Big 12. It's certainly the biggest change of competition, right? The defensive backs had to cover Rashee Rice last year at SMU. He's a pro, right? That was a real Power 5 program looking kind of guy, right? They've had those guys across different teams. I'm going to go at Tajay Spears, but deep into the tackle him. He's a pro, right? Frankly, the offense had to go against Sauce Gardner the year before, right? Sauce Gardner was a top 5 pick pro, right? Like those kinds of guys exist in the American Athletic Conference. The defensive linemen that the Houston's going to have to block are fewer and farther between in the American Athletic Conference as far as finding a Big 12 caliber guy. And so I am encouraged, and I have continued to be encouraged by the way this thing is moving forward for that group. Now, obviously, Cameron Johnson was a big loss in the transfer portal last spring, but I think it's worth pointing out that they only lost 1 starter. Everyone else should be coming back, and assuming everyone's healthy, right, they ought to be great, especially if you pull in, they pulled in Shamar Habdi-Lee, who's a junior transfer from FIU. Can he make some contributions? Can he fill in some of those spots as well? I'm also looking some at Peyton Dunn. I've heard a lot about Peyton Dunn coming from Louisiana Monroe. I think I've heard his name a lot because he's in more of a rotational spot. He's playing a couple different positions along the line. So we'll see where that kinds of things go. And then the last thing I mentioned as far as guys that are getting some more talk and reps and those kind of things. Jalen Garth has all the tools. He is a UT Austin commit originally, 6'5", 305. And he transferred in actually before last season, but had to sit out a year because of when he transferred and those kinds of things. That's a group that, as far as talent goes, the starting group ought to be ready for Big 12 football. It's going to be the younger guys or the guys that maybe don't get as many reps, the rotational guys. Are those guys ready? And I think the more we hear from the leadership in front of them, the more confident I am that they will be. But in the second segment, I want to talk some about, can you be a leadership group without being the most Big 12 ready or the best on the team? So let's jump into that in 1 second. But first, Coogs House. All right, so it is the summertime. It is baseball season, and it's time to take your first swing at betting on MLB at FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just $20, and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend on betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think hits the first home run and more, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on the MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, they have the Houston Astros tied with the Texas Rangers to win the AL West. Now, as you look at that, we both saw that that 4-game series where Houston pulled off 3 in Arlington to beat the Arlington Rangers at their place in their first ever 4-game series sellout, I should say. Big time win there. They further have the Houston Astros at plus 1,000 to win the World Series. Look, we know that odds are in the last 6 years that they're going to at least get close. If not, that feels like pretty good money, even with all the injuries that they got going on. I'm saying to go to FanDuel. I'm saying to take the Astros when in doubt. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get a $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, so I do want to talk some about this idea of can a not necessarily Big 12 caliber, or maybe not necessarily like the most experienced or most talented group. Most experienced, actually, I would say the offensive line is, but it can not the most talented group be the leader, right? Do you have to be Michael Jordan to lead the Bulls? Do you have to be LeBron James to lead the Cavs? Do you have to be, in more football sense, the starting quarterback to lead the offense? Do you have to be Ray Lewis to lead the defense, etc.? Right? I think it's interesting that Houston's got such great leadership and, frankly, so many great veteran snaps in a snap counts in a Houston Cougar uniform along that offensive line. And most people talk about the skill positions. And I think that's an interesting back and forth because I do think the skill positions have a number of pros. We talked before, and we'll talk, I'm sure, multiple more times about how the Houston Cougar wide receiver room is one of the best in the country. And frankly, one was underrated in the country. But as far as being leaders in the locker room go, or being leaders on the field go, I think the offensive line is the only position group you could really say on any football team can be an impactful leadership group without necessarily having the most talent. It'd be really hard for a wide receiver room that was just okay to lead a football team, right? Because wide receivers can kind of get schemed out of a football game pretty quickly if you don't have enough talent. You also, if you don't have very talented wide receivers, might just not use them a whole lot. You might do something different on offense. And frankly, there's a lot of homogeneity as far as like a lot of crossover skills if they're all just okay. That's not really Houston's problem. They've got a talented wide receiver room, but you catch my drift. If you just have okay wide receivers, it's hard for them to lead. If you have a quarterback that just kind of shows up and does his job and doesn't do anything spectacularly, it becomes kind of hard for him to be a true leader. Now, I guess they are the guy calling the plays and kind of a de facto coach in the field, so some of the stuff may fall on their shoulders, but also, you know, that in the end zone, he's going to throw a jump ball and rely on the wide receiver to go get it, or they're going to turn around and hand the ball off and rely on the running back to go get it, right? And that's not just like you start looking for leadership in other places, right? Like Trent Dilfer was not the leader of those Baltimore Ravens that won the Super Bowl, right? Frankly, the thing that we don't want to talk about is that Peyton Manning in his second Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos was a lot more like Trent Dilfer. And while he might have had leadership roles vocally on the field, you saw a lot of leadership out of a lot of different positions on that team. And then obviously he had the veteran leadership kind of things. And that's the snap kind of gets the offensive line goes. The offensive line, I think, gets to be a leader even if they don't necessarily have as many future pros or whatever as other position groups because of in this instance, how many snaps they have playing collegiate football, Division I football for Houston, football and Dana's offense, etc. together, right? Again, 4 starters returning is a big, big deal for them. And it would have been 5 had Cameron not transferred. So, you know, it's good to have some continuity there. But also, it's the 5 fingers that make a fist kind of thing, right? The idea that these 5 guys have to come together to play together, and we only think about or hear about them as a more casual observer watching the football games when one of them messes up, right? If you're going in for the punch, you only notice any one individual finger if it's sticking out, right? Whereas if you pull together like a clenched fist, it's just one solid whop, right? That's what you're looking at with the offensive line. We only think about when, someone gets mixed up on a stunt from the defensive lineman and gives up a sack or a holding call or whatever, right? That's the only time we think about the offensive line making mistakes. They actually rank, and last year ranked very well in Pro Football Focus as far as like comparing their statistics and their the percentage of time they're doing the right thing in the right place, their scores on Pro Football Focus to other offensive lines across the country. They did very, very well, and I think that that's something we kind of continue to forget. But like Patrick Paul ranked as higher than anyone in the country, right? He was the second highest ranked pass protector in all of college football last season. Jack Freeman was also very high relative to other centers across college football. And frankly, in the snaps he got to play, Unije was as well. And I think that, it'll be interesting to see how those guys translate into a new offense. We'll talk about more of that in a second with Coach Imani Gavi, but also how that translates into, they've got the tape to show they can do the job. And so when they're leading the locker room or when they're getting guys ready to go through the grueling schedule that is the Big 12 and going from playing, UT Austin 1 week to playing Texas Tech another week to playing Kansas State another week to, TCU week 3 even. And that's not to overlook UTSA necessarily, although it's just a little bit different, right? They got a lot more time to get ready for that one. It's not Big 12, right? To see these guys lead in those instances, to be like, listen, they put in the work because you can see their body of work behind them. And they also have to have the team, they have that body of work and a team first mentality because they work together on an offensive line. I don't think other position groups get to do that in the same way. Like if you have a Patrick Paul level single linebacker, he sticks out as an individual leader more than a unit does, right? The linebackers are not the leaders in that case. Ray Lewis is, right? If you have a Patrick Paul caliber safety, the safety group is not the leadership. Earl Thomas is, right? If you have a Patrick Paul caliber running back, the running back room is not the, leaders of the team. Emmitt Smith is, right? Like those kinds of things don't translate exactly the same way. Whereas if you have Patrick Paul on the offensive line, Jack Freeman on the offensive line, Tank Jenkins on the offensive line, suddenly it's not like, yes, Tank could be a leader. Yes, Jack Freeman will be a leader. Yes, the younger offensive linemen like Pancake and Carson and those guys will look up to them in a leadership role individually. But as a unit, that group leads the offense because it's 5 guys on the offense working together at all times. That's 5 out of 11 at any given point in the football game on the offense are all together on the same page. And I think that that's why they get to do that and get to be the leaders that they are moving forward. Now, I say that to say that I do think the wide receiver room is more talented. And I do think that when we look back at this season in January, hopefully like mid-January, that'd be great, right? Get to a January 6th game, like look all those that'd be great. But when we look back at the 2023 Houston Cougars in the first year in the Big 12 in January of 24, we're going to look back and see a football program that was led by an offensive line group, even though the wide receiver room had multiple pros in it. Even though, Donovan Smith or Lucas Coley, one, or perhaps both, have tremendous campaigns, right? Throwing and running the football. A running back room that kind of did running back by committee and had multiple guys showing up, whether that's Campbell or Snead or whomever, right? Whatever. Hopefully a defense that's much improved, right? A lot of new faces in the back half of that defense. All of that is to say that does not mean when we look back in January at how talented other parts of this football team are, that this unit, the offensive line unit, that will not mean that they did not lead this team, right? Whether it's Jack talking about having led this team for 6 years, Patrick talking about having led this team as one of the most talented guys on the roster, or even Ruben Unije talking about like, listen, I've been around the block, I've been here before, etc. Or if you look at, we'll see what we get out of Jalen Garth this year, but Jalen Garth has seen what UT Austin looks like, right? He's seen the Big 12 at its most expensive level, right? Like he's seen how those kinds of things look, and I think that that's all going to be something to keep in mind. That doesn't mean I don't have more questions for the offensive line. And so in the third segment, I want to talk some about what those questions might be. And so let's jump on into that idea of what those questions might be. One, I'm interested to see who plays the two guard spots. A big interior offensive line loss in Cameron Johnson, who I alluded to at the top of the show. And I don't mean to say that that's just going to be forgotten, right? He is a very, very talented kid and may be a pro in his own right one day. How does Houston replace that spot, right? That's, I think, something we got to start off the top, because that's very like depth chart roster, crux of the team kind of thing. And we'll see the answer to that fairly quickly, I think. The other big question I have is, what does Nyagavi's offense look like with Dana Holgorsen's principles molded together? Dana himself mentioned, and we'll talk more about him throughout the week, Dana himself mentioned at Big XII Media Days that, if anything, of the old air raid guys, he's probably moved away from the air raid the most, talking about things that he and his program do that are a little bit different. He focuses on the run game a little bit more. You've seen that. You saw that a couple years back with Alton McCaskill. You saw that through stretches last year as well. Frankly, I wanted to see more quarterback run game last year, but we'll see what they do this year with it. So that is to say that there was a lot of, if again, the nitty gritty on it, a lot of 10 personnel run game and air raid principled offense with running, not snap counts, but like running emphasis on the run game for an air raid offense, but still has the field spread out. Nyagavi comes in with a little bit different kind of system. He likes running more 11 personnel, which means a little bit more tight end play, a little bit more big receiver play. You'll sometimes even see Nyagavi do more 12 stuff, which means a running back and two tight end fullback types. So does Manjack become a guy that can do a little bit of both as a big wide receiver? We'll see. But in doing all of that, right, while we know that Nyagavi will transition the offense into something new in that sense, and Nyagavi will have his own sprinkles and twists and turns on the offense that way, what does the offensive line look like as they adjust to that? Because I mentioned Patrick Paul was the second highest rated pass blocker in all of college football last season. How does that translate to being a great run blocker and a more run-heavy offense this season? He mentioned in Big XII Media Days that he has been working on his hips, his leverage, his body. He's ready for it. But what does that look like for a 6'7", 315 guy that did such a great job keeping guys off of Clayton Dune for the last 4 years, right? We'll see, and we'll be following it all season long here at Locked On Cougs. Make sure you subscribe down below. You get the latest Houston Cougars each and every day. Appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen today. For a second listen, it's Summer League. The Houston Rockets are balling. Cam Whitmore's a ton of fun. Go check out Jackson Gatlin, Locked On Rockets. It's a big, big fun time for the Houston Rockets. Make sure you check them out. Locked On Cougs is a proud member of Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.